I think it's hilarious that we just use that small JBL
when we
in
have
a
these
room when
massive
we have
speakers.
multi-million-dollar speakers. But that's like,
You know what? That's fitting. I feel like it's fitting.
it's symbolic of me. Meredith, thank you for letting me come in here and interview you.
Well, thank you for interviewing me. It's an honor.
I'm really excited to talk about your story and go into more about what you do and talk about maybe some of this equipment behind us.
Yeah.
You are an audio engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk a little bit more about what that profession is and what you do on a day-to-day basis to people who might not have any idea what that title means?
Yeah. So more specifically, I'm a recording engineer.
Yes.
So there's a lot of different engineers. So we kind of broadcast with audio, right?
Gotcha.
But I'm very specifically a recording engineer or a tracking engineer in a studio. So it's my job to capture everything that the producer, the artist, whoever is looking for. Easiest way to put this is that when an artist has a song, they're usually paired with a producer to say, here's everything that needs to happen on the song, or here's how we take it from a demo to something that people really want to hear, right? And while I can sometimes play that producer role, my real role here is to sit between the producer and the artist and say, here's how we capture that sound that you're looking for. So the producer's like, I want this kind of sound. I say, perfect. I have just the microphone, I have just the idea, just the technique, whatever that may look like. So I'm really the technical side of things, making sure that, I don't hear anything out of the ordinary or, things like that. Doesn't sound as glamorous as maybe the producer, but I also don't create music. So I don't try to take that role from the producer. I don't try to take that role from the artist because that's not who I am. That's not my thing. But there are times that I've played that role. It just kind of depends on what your artist needs,
That's really special.
Yeah.
What got you into this role in the first place? I mean, you graduated from Full Sail.
Yes.
You clearly have a passion for music.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about the stepping stones along the way to get to a role like this?
A ridiculous stepping stones is really what it is. So when I was young, I loved music. I was like, I want to work in music, but I really didn't know what that looked like because the only jobs I'd ever seen in music were, well, you can be a music teacher or you can perform. And I was like, well, don't get me wrong. I love singing. I grew up in choir. I grew up in, performing all the time, but it wasn't like, oh, I want to be a star.
Yeah.
Like, I think when you're really young, everyone wants to be famous in some sort of way. But once you realize that's ridiculous, at some point for some people, I was like, yeah, that's not me. I don't really love being on stage.
Yeah.
What I did love was being stage manager and things back behind the scenes. And I noticed I really love being behind the scenes. And when my sister went off to college, I was maybe 10 years old-ish. I was like, I'm going to turn her bedroom into a studio. And that was that. Like, I'm doing this. I want to make music and I want to turn this into a studio. My parents were like, okay, have fun. Of course, I had no idea what that looked like. I had zero money. So I'm on Google, recording equipment, looking for stuff. And everyone's like, okay, whatever. Obviously that fell through pretty quickly, but I always sat with a little piano in my room and tried to make music, not realizing how hard it was to actually make music with zero talent for making music, by the way. Zero talent. So long story short, I had one of my brother's best friends. She went off to school for recording. Now she was more of a songwriter, but she could major in two things, which was recording and songwriting. And I was like, that's not a thing. She was like, yeah, it is. That's what I'm doing. And I was like, sign me up. I'm done. And so somewhere in middle school, that was it. That was my path, is I'm going to school to be a recording engineer.
Knew.
I knew.
That's awesome.
I was like, I want to be in a studio. I want to work behind the board. I want to be behind the scenes in music. And everyone kind of laughed at that. It was like, oh, that's so cute. And as I got through high school and that was the plan, that is what I'm doing. Everyone's like, oh, you should get a teaching certificate just to be safe. Are you sure? Are you sure? And I'm like, they're like, that's not a good industry to get into. I'm like, you don't know anything about the industry. So how are you going to say it's not a good industry to get into? It is hard. Don't get me wrong. So I tried to, at churches and at school, I tried to get on soundboards and kind of do a little bit of that. Opportunities were just really slim. Because I just didn't have anyone to guide me to say, hey, you can walk into a studio and say you want an internship. I didn't know that.
And were you in Florida for all this? Or?
No, I'm in Texas.
Gotcha.
So I'm from Texas, the Dallas area. There are some great studios there. I just, so young with no one in the music industry around me, I had no idea. That's something I kind of wish that I knew at a young age, that I could have stepped foot into a studio and said, hey, I know I'm young, but I want to learn. And not every studio will take you, but a lot would. They want to teach you young. But I figured going to school was probably the best option for me. That's kind of what, obviously, the natural trajectory of what parents want you to do and what you feel like you have to do, you know. So I went to a smaller school called Dallas Baptist University. They had a recording program, and it's a great school. It just wasn't the right fit for me.
Gotcha.
The upside and downside at the same time for me was that it was really heavy on the music theory and on, you know, conducting and this and that. And all of these extra, I had to continue with my practice of music and do juries all the time. And I just never saw the studio. I was just like, okay, you got to get through these classes to get there. And then these classes. And I never got there. And I was going crazy. And I was like, this isn't the right fit for me.
They're just stringing you along. That's so
Exactly.
interesting.
And I just was like, I didn't connect with the people there because they all wanted to be composers or music teachers or performers. And I was just like, I don't fit in any of these categories, you know, like this just isn't me. I wasn't as creative as a lot of people there because I'm creative in a different way, but I'm not creative in that musical form. And so it just didn't mesh. And a little bit of encouragement for people. There's a program called Grammy U that I was told to be a part of like when I first got to school there though, which was really awesome because it got me into sound checks for a lot of major artists and like Q&As with them, with a lot of major just industry people in general. And that's where I went to a really cool Q&A with Mike Posner. And I met a really fantastic engineer there who I was talking to, and I found out he went to Full Sail. He was like, oh yeah, I went to Full Sail. It's really awesome to start, you know, seeing, you know, more women get into this and see young people really want to do this. And a few months later, he came in and did a talk at the school and kind of showed us like the first time I had ever seen stems in my life. He had showed us like, here's individual stems from the track, individual tracks. And I was just like mesmerized. It was an hour-long talk, and I could have sat there for 5 hours.
That's sweet.
I was
well, that's
just
how
like,
you know.
Yeah. He ripped
it.
apart a Kirk Franklin song because he was Kirk Franklin's engineer. I don't know if he still is, but and I was just like, just chains on this one. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what I want. And that was kind of like what sealed my fate after a really dark time in my life. I was like, I got to get out of here. And sure enough, came to Full Sail, and that's kind of a very long story.
Yeah.
It's probably not exactly what you're hoping
That's
for.
what I was hoping for.
Yeah.
And then you got a degree from here.
Yes.
And now you're giving back as a teacher.
Yes, which is also something I never thought I would do.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, at first I felt like that was a failure for me, which sounds so ridiculous, right? Because my goal was to go out and be an engineer at a big studio. I didn't need to have a big name. I just wanted to do important things.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I went out and did myself justice or did my career justice by turning around and coming here. Little did I know that I'm an idiot. And that was the best thing. God was leading me here.
That's
he
so
just kept
special.
showing me over and over, like, you're supposed to be here. And oh my gosh, has it changed my life for the better.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's amazing to watch you work. I've really
thank you.
enjoyed like looking over your shoulder and seeing like your mannerisms and how you interact with these artists, because I've learned a lot like psychologically
Yeah.
through how you're working. Could you talk a little bit more about what it's like to work with artists and how you have to not tread lightly, but be very meticulous with how you
Yeah.
deal with these people?
Yeah. First and foremost, it's understanding who you're working with, because every artist is so vastly different, right? To where some I can be really straight up honest, be like, you were flat, let's do it again. And others you kind of have to tiptoe around that of like, hey, that was a really good take, but there's some things I just want you to do it again, see if we can give you a little more power. You know, you try to tread lightly. And as you get closer with artists, they tend to trust you a little bit more to say those things. Yeah. And then there's also times to know, one of the biggest things is your role in the room. So I kind of talked about that earlier of like, I'm the engineer, right? There's a producer, there's an artist, there's these people. And my job as an engineer is to not change the song or tell them necessarily how to perform the song. Unless I have that okay from, you know, the producer or someone to kind of be like, yeah, you can nudge in a little bit, like, oh, let's do it again, you're flat, you know? But you gotta know where your role is, because sometimes they want you to sit there and just press a button and be done. And other times they're looking for you to be a little bit more involved. And that's what makes different types of engineers. And that's where, you know, some engineers end up becoming producers because of things like that.
Yeah.
But the industry has always been that you start as one thing and maybe it grows into another. Now we want to do everything as everyone, right?
Gotcha.
And I know I've gotten off on tangent a little bit, but I think it's important to understand my role, right? And how I interact with these artists because of that role. But it's really just about reading them, especially when it's a new artist. I kind of take a few things into account. Have they ever been into a studio before? Is this new for them or not? Because that affects things, especially if you see how large this room is.
Yeah. And
we have windows everywhere, right? Some people are really timid by that. So
I was the first time I walked in here.
exactly, right? And especially if you're performing. And that's the hardest thing, is getting someone to perform on the other side of the glass for you, knowing that they're out there alone, right? So it's a lot of encouragement, especially for new artists or people who are not familiar with a space like this. Sometimes that's me taking, like, we have what we call baffles, these big like walls that we can build up, and kind of closing them in a little bit more to feel like they're a little bit more comfortable.
It's like a hug.
So they're not so wide open.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll dim the lights. They can feel a little bit more comfortable.
You're the director of this experience.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So like their performance is directly based on how I interact with them. So if I just say, just sing it, you know, or whatever, which it could be any type of form. We're not just vocals, right? It could be guitar, it could be drums, whatever. But typically singers have the hardest time because that is like their voice is their instrument, right? And it's not the same way that you would practice a guitar. And so I feel like vocalists tend to be a little bit more sensitive to that, obviously, because that's not something they can necessarily change about themselves.
Yeah.
But learning how to kind of coach them a little bit. And so I kind of take those things into account. Their body language tells me a ton. So I always am making sure that I place my microphones at kind of an angle so I can see their facial expressions.
Gotcha.
I'm watching their, like if they're hugging themselves and folding their arms, that's obviously not usually a good stance for singing. And so I can tell they're really uncomfortable. They're trying to get a little more comfortable. And then you have artists who do not have a care in the world. They're ready to perform whenever. And they come in and here's what I have to know. It's not about me encouraging them. It's about making sure my microphone doesn't blow when they sing, like, because they're going to just belt it out.
That's awesome.
And you learn a lot from a ton of different artists. I've made plenty of mistakes in my time, and I probably will make more, but you learn from each of those. I have had artists walk out of just like, no, it's not working for me anymore. And they just leave. That could be attributed to maybe something I was doing, or just, they just didn't really want to perform that day. You know, you just kind of have to learn to, I don't want to say people please, but it's a little bit of people pleasing.
Yeah.
You know,
No,
there's a fine line. I know that that's kind of a very touchy topic today. It's like people pleasing, but I'm here to provide a service.
That's sweet.
And, you know, I've got to make sure I cater to them, make sure they're comfortable. Yeah.
What are some things different artists have done to make your job easier? Like, how can they prepare and present themselves to make your life better? Where you're like, thank you, that type of thing.
That's a loaded question. Practicing. Oh my gosh, just practicing. When people come in and they don't know the music and this is going to sound really mean. I don't mean it to sound mean, but when you don't know the music and you're not a good enough player to just play it on the first take or second take, like not everyone can play on a first or second take, but there are really good musicians who maybe don't know the music, but they can hear it and they can say, okay, I can perform that. And then there's others that they need more practice, and it's okay to need practice, right? But please practice before you come in. Making sure, you know, it also depends on the type of session, right? If this is, we should already have the song, we're coming in to record, we're coming in to cut this and be done. That's one type of session, right? As opposed to a creative session where you have time to kind of play around with the music and kind of, oh, you know what? I didn't really like that. Let's try this take over here and do something a little different. So when people come into a session that's like, hey, we've got 4 hours. We have to get all of these things done in 4 hours, and you don't have an ending to the song, and you're not good at coming up with an ending, that's where this becomes really difficult.
Yeah.
And it just takes time. So being well rehearsed or understanding what it is that you're doing is a big thing for me. I'm trying to think of what else.
Just being punctual.
Punctual is a big one. I am so used to people not being punctual that it's, you know, it is what it is at this point. And you know what's funny is like every genre of music is very different with that.
That's funny.
Some genres are like, you always know they're going to be an hour late. I just know it. So my whole job is always to hurry up and wait. I will always make sure I'm prepared. Even if I know they're going to show up 2 hours late, I'm still going to show up at my normal time as if the session was starting 2 hours like on time, you know? So punctual is great because then we have more time to kind of get through things.
They're paying for it, right?
You know,
So,
you would think. Sometimes they just don't see it that way, you know. But it always varies. Punctual is definitely a big thing. And then just kind of not being afraid to speak your voice, like speak your mind a little bit. You know, if there's something that you need from me, I need you to tell me that instead of being uncomfortable about it. Because we have to have such an open conversation to be able to make this work. And if, let's say there's a lot of especially new artists, they don't have producers. So I need you to tell me, do you want me to help you produce this? Or do you just want to do this as you want it, right? Where do you want me to fall in that line? Do you want me to say, hey, I don't think that's working, we should try something else? Or do you want me to just be like, great job, we're going on, you know? Because I don't like to lie about takes. I don't like to be like, oh, that was a perfect take, you know? Because there's no point.
There's no point.
You're whether you're paying a lot of money or you're doing it on free or someone else's dime, right? It's wasting everyone's time to come in and just be like, oh, every take is great, when we all know it's not.
And then they book another one and they come back and do the same thing. And no one's being honest with each other.
You know, I've worked with plenty of artists. I work in a very unique situation because working here at Full Sail, we've got bands or artists that come in to work with our students on a list. And some come in super prepared, and others I've been working on the same 5 songs for 5 years because they just keep redoing it and redoing it and redoing it. And that to me is just telling me either you're not ready or, you know, you need to try something new. And so that kind of falls into that a little bit of like, prepare yourselves, practice, right? But also, I don't want to sit here and waste your time, and I don't want you to waste my time in lying to you and saying like, oh, that was great. I would rather say, hey, I don't like that, let's do it again. I try to be pretty with at least the artists that I know pretty well, that I work with often. I'm pretty honest with them. And I don't want to say brutal, but you know, I have no issue in saying, I'm getting rid of that take, let's do it again. Because I'm not going to take a million takes, and I'm not going to keep a million takes. That's the one thing I try to teach all my students is like, you don't want to keep more than absolute max 6 takes. If you can't find what you need within 6 takes, you're not going to go through 85 takes, you know? I don't want to sit there and comp through 85 takes. So I'll keep 6. Maybe we do more than 6, I'll keep only 6. And the better your artist gets, the more seasoned they are. And this sounds like I'm just like, there's good and there's bad, but there really is. And there's prepared and like new in the industry and not so new in the industry that comes in. And so you see a lot of different sides of that coin.
You mentioned creativity in your side of things, and you said something like, well, you might not always be able to tell that I'm being creative. Could you talk about how you're creative on a board like this and what gets you excited?
Yeah. So my creativity really comes in miking techniques and microphones to choose. And that sounds so simple because you could just throw up any microphone, right? But my art form comes in knowing what microphone sounds good where. So I keep going to vocals, for example, because it's easy. It's, you know, but like a vocalist, I could put this, you know, M149 $5,000 microphone on this vocalist, and it can sound like crap. But I can put a $500 microphone on them, and it sounds amazing. But vice versa on the next artist. Right? So it is up to me to understand the choices that I have and how to tailor it to each sound, to different drum styles, because no two drummers play the same, but besides that, every genre sounds so different, right? It's my job to know what a kick drum should sound like in pop music as opposed to country music, right? And so that comes into the miking styles. But also just like an example the other day was that I had the brass band of Central Florida in here. 45 people.
Really?
And I had to be creative on how I was going to mic that so that A, it sounded the best that it could without feeling like I was overpowering in each section, right? But also capturing a really wide image. So that's where I use different stereo miking techniques and things like that. And then coming down from the microphones, then it becomes creative on this side. Do I want to use all this gear over here? I've got hundreds of compressors and EQs and all of these little things. So sorry.
Timber.
And then I have to decide, do I want to use this? And if I do, what do I want to use and why? Everything is going to change my sound. It all colors it in some way, shape, or form. Do I want something that's super discreet to just control my peaks? Do I want something that's really going to saturate it in this warmth? Do I want to take out certain frequencies and things like that? So that's where my creativity comes in. Also, as well as how big do we want this, right? If I look at the producer, I'm like, do you want this section really big? Yes, great. I can throw in extra microphones, or I can say, okay, let's say I can do this for many different things. Let's say we're doing a gang vocal where there's a ton of people around a microphone. You want like this big, everyone shouting the same thing, whatever it is. We can do that one time, call it done. We can do it 2-3 times and keep stacking it like that. That helps. But if I want it to feel like it's even larger and I've got more people than I do, let's say I only have 5 people out there, but I want it to sound like 50. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do multiple takes, but I'm going to have them switch positions in the room.
Oh, that's so cool.
I'm going to have them stand next to somebody else, move across the room, because then it starts to sound bigger and fuller.
Sounds like
you
the
have
ensemble.
more voices. Yeah. Exactly. So where I only have a 5-person choir, I now have a 50-person choir, just by moving people around. I do it with string players. If I only have, on the last album I produced, I had a cello player and a violin. I was hoping for more, but that's all we could do at the time, and that was fine. So when we did it, I had them then double it, and so I had them move further back in the room and then play it again. So I had them play it technically 4 times. I had them play it 2 up close, back further in the room. Now, if I had microphones that could have easily gone for either one, I would have maybe had them switch spots in the room too. But that only really works if you start if I have multiple of the same instrument and I can kind of switch them in places a little bit. But little things like that. So that's where my creativity comes in of like, how can I make this sound like we want it to? Can I get this really close and personal and breathy and things like that? Or do I want this to be really far away and distant from somebody? That's where my techniques come in. Telling
that's really neat.
Move further back from the microphone for this, get closer for this,
And then you hear that sound at the end and you're very satisfied because you pulled something off that you might not have considered before.
Exactly. And sometimes it doesn't work and you're like, well, we can scratch that off the list, But it's a lot of fun to get to just experiment that way.
It's so cool to hear you talk about yourself as an artist in that way, because I firmly believe that all people are artists. And that's the point of these interviews is I want people to see like, you are an artist, and here's how.
Yeah.
And so I love hearing you talk about that.
I appreciate it, yeah.
Because I believe it. You really can. So many people listen to music without thinking about all the work that
all the pieces that go in, And
it's so cool to see how involved you are with all this machinery, and you get such an amazing end product.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I feel like we're at a natural wrapping point.
Okay. Yeah.
The last question I'll ask you is to speak from the heart to inspire anyone who might be considering your line of work, or just in general, how you can inspire people that might be in a rut or might not know what to do with themselves moving forward as a creative.
Okay.
It's a huge question.
One of my biggest things, and this kind of, if you're in a rut, it maybe feels like it doesn't work for you, but it does. Don't be afraid to apply yourself. I feel like so many people just don't want to apply themselves, or they're afraid of what might come. And I feel like that's so many things in this industry, very specifically, you have to want it. If you just think like, oh, it'd be cool, but you're not going to get anywhere very far. You have to be willing to apply yourself and go for it and just jump in. It's probably going to be uncomfortable for a little bit, but once you kind of get your footing, you'll see that it really pays off.
That's awesome. Yeah. Is there anything I'm missing from our conversation that you'd like to either promote or talk about?
No, that's me.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for your time. That was amazing. Yeah.